Before we continue, a quick note. This channel does have memberships for anyone who wants to go a little deeper into the stories themselves. They're split into Lost, Hiker, Park Ranger, and Skinwalker. Different levels, different access. Some members get early looks. Some leave their mark on future stories. Some members become the story itself. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, it's there. Now, back to the story. The Cree call it Wendigo. The Ojibwe say Wendigo. Parks Canada calls it Unspecified Wildlife Concern. I call it The Reason I Resigned. My name is Thomas Birch, and for 11 years I worked as a park warden in Pukasqua National Park, Ontario. 87,000 hectares of boreal forest along the Lake Superior coastline, most of it accessible only by water or winter traverse. I specialized in winter wildlife surveys, the kind of work that puts you alone in the backcountry for days at a time, tracking populations, checking remote cameras, documenting predator-prey patterns. I'm telling you this so you understand I wasn't some weekend hiker who panicked at shadows. I knew that country. I knew what belonged there and what didn't. February of 2021, I was assigned a standard winter traverse from Hattie Cove down to the White River mouth, approximately 43 kilometers of shoreline survey. The assignment was routine: snowshoe, the coastal route, check trail cameras, document any unusual wildlife activity, radio in every 12 hours. Weather was holding stable, minus 18 Celsius, clear skies. I'd done this exact route 7 times before. I left the Hattie Cove station at dawn on February 9th with 6 days of supplies, satellite phone, standard emergency gear, and a small caliber rifle for predator deterrent. The first day was textbook. Fresh snow made tracking easy, and I logged healthy populations of snowshoe, hare, a few lynx trails, plenty of deer sign. I made camp that night at Otter Head, approximately 14 kilometers south of the station. The second day, things started feeling wrong in ways I couldn't immediately articulate. I found the first dead hare around 9 a.m. It was lying in the center of the trail, perfectly intact except for its neck, which had been snapped with what looked like surgical precision. No blood, no feeding, just killed and left there. I marked it in my log and kept moving. Lynx sometimes kill more than they eat. When prey is abundant, surplus killing, we call it. Not common in winter, but not unheard of. By noon, I'd found 6 more. All snowshoe hare, all with broken necks, all positioned in a nearly perfect line along my route, spaced roughly 400 meters apart. The last one was still warm. I stopped and did what I was trained to do. I assessed. Could be a lynx on a killing spree. Could be a wolverine, though they usually cache kills. Could be some kind of territorial behavior I wasn't familiar with. What it couldn't be was coincidence. Something was killing these animals in a deliberate pattern, and that pattern was following the exact route I was walking. I checked my GPS. My trail from the previous day showed normal variation, the natural wandering path you take when you're navigating terrain, but these hare kills formed a line so straight you could have used a ruler, like something had planned this route before I walked it. That thought sat wrong in my gut, so I radioed the station. Got Bill Kowalski, the senior warden. I described what I was seeing, kept my voice level and professional. There was a pause before he responded. Tom, you anywhere near Otter Island Point? About 3 clicks north. Why? Another pause, longer this time. Old wardens had a protocol, probably bullshit. But if you find snowshoe hare killed, but not eaten in a line, you're supposed to call for extraction. He said it like he was embarrassed. It's not official, just something the Ojibwe staff used to say. What's the reasoning? They said it means something's mapping you, learning your pattern. He cleared his throat. Look, it's probably nothing. Just keep your radio close, yeah? And Tom? Don't follow the line. I told him I'd check in at 1800 hours and signed off. The problem was, the line was my route. The coastal trail followed the topography, and the topography funneled you into certain paths. To avoid the line, I'd have to cut inland through dense bush, adding days to the traverse. I'm not a superstitious man. I believe in evidence, in data, in rational explanation. So I kept walking the coast. By 1500 hours, I had found 12 more hare. The spacing remained consistent, the kills remained fresh, and I started noticing something else. The forest had gone completely silent. No chickadees, no newthatches, no ravens. In boreal forest in February, you get used to a baseline of sound, wind in the pines, ice shifting on the lake, the occasional crack of a tree splitting in the cold. This was different. This was absence. I made camp early, at 16:30, on a small rise about 200 meters from the shore. Good sight lines, solid spruce cover for the tent. I built a larger fire than usual, stacking enough wood to keep it burning through the night. While I was gathering deadfall, I found another hare. This one wasn't on the trail. It was hanging from a low branch directly above where I'd planned to pitch my tent, suspended by what looked like its own sinew, neck broken, eyes frozen open. I moved my camp. The new site was more exposed, but closer to the open lake ice. Some instinct I didn't want to examine told me I wanted fewer trees around me. I set up the tent, melted snow for water, ate a cold meal because I didn't want to create cooking smells. The whole time, I felt watched, not the casual awareness you get when animals are curious. This was focused, intelligent, patient. At 1800 hours, I radioed Bill, told him about the hanging hare, told him about the silence. He didn't laugh or tell me I was being paranoid. How far are you from the lighthouse keeper's cabin? I checked the map. 6, maybe 7 clicks south. Get there tonight. That's not a suggestion, Tom. It's almost dark. I know what time it is. Get to the cabin. It's got a wood stove, solid walls, and it's registered as emergency shelter. Get there and lock yourself in until dawn. Bill, what the hell is? Just go, please. I've known Bill for 8 years. He's former military, unflappable, the kind of guy who once stitched his own leg wound in the field rather than aboard a rescue operation. I'd never heard that tone in his voice before. I packed by headlamp. The coastal route to the cabin would take roughly 2.5 hours at a hard pace. I'd be doing it in full dark, in -20 cold, on snowshoes. Normally this would be borderline reckless, exactly the kind of decision that gets winter campers killed. But something in Bill's voice, combined with what I'd been seeing, made staying put feel worse. I started moving at 1845. For the first hour, it was just hard work. Head down, focus on breathing, maintain pace, don't think about the darkness pressing in beyond the headlamp beam. The moon was 3/4 full, which gave some ambient light once my eyes adjusted. The lake ice to my left reflected silver. The forest to my right was a black wall. At 1953, I heard my name. Tom. Just that. My name. Spoken in a voice that sounded like mine but wasn't. It came from the forest, maybe 30 meters inland, at the exact volume I'd used to call to someone at that distance. I stopped walking, turned off my headlamp, let my eyes adjust to the moonlight. Nothing. No movement, no shapes. Tom. Again. Same voice. Same distance. But now it was ahead of me on the trail. I turned the headlamp back on and moved faster. Over the next 40 minutes, I heard it 6 more times. Always my voice. Always just my name. The positions made no sense behind me. Then ahead, then to my right inland, then impossibly back behind me again. No human could move that fast, that quietly, through winter forest in the dark. At 2037, I saw the first track. It was in my headlamp beam, directly on the trail, impossibly fresh, a boot print. My boot print, I recognized the tread pattern from my sorels, but I hadn't walked this section yet. The track was ahead of me, where I was going. I found 3 more over the next 100 meters, all heading south. All my prints, all where I hadn't walked. The rational part of my brain tried to construct explanations. Another hiker with similar boots, a loop in the trail I'd forgotten, some kind of visual confusion from exhaustion and fear. But that part of my brain was getting quieter, pushed down by something older, something that remembered what it meant to be prey. At 2100 hours, I saw the cabin lights. The Otter Point Lighthouse Keeper's cabin is a small Parks Canada emergency shelter. 1 room, wood stove, bunks, emergency supplies. It's maintained but rarely used, mostly serving as a waypoint for summer kayakers. I could see the outline against the lake ice, maybe 400 meters ahead. Between me and the cabin was open ground, a frozen marsh that in summer would be bog. No cover, just moonlit snow and scattered dead cattails. I should have felt relief. Instead, every instinct screamed at me to look behind. And I turned. Something was standing at the tree line. The moonlight made it hard to judge distance or size, but the shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin. It stood completely still, and even at 100 meters I could see it was looking at me. Not turning its head to look, it was already looking, like it had been standing there the entire time I'd been walking, waiting for me to notice. I ran. 40 pounds of pack, snowshoes, knee-deep powder in the marsh. I ran like I was 20 years old, not 43. My lungs burned in the cold air. The pack straps cut into my shoulders. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it moving now, pacing me, staying just at the edge of my peripheral vision. The cabin door was unlocked. I crashed through, dropped my pack, slammed the door behind me, and threw the bolt. There were shutters on the windows, heavy plywood on hinges, installed to protect the glass from winter storms. I closed and latched all 4 of them, then stood in the dark, breathing hard, listening. For several minutes, nothing, just my heartbeat in the wind outside. Then, footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate, the same rhythm I walk with. They crossed from left to right, paused at the door, continued to the far end of the porch, then back, over and over, pacing. I didn't turn on the light. I found the wood stove by feel, got a fire started with the emergency kindling. As warmth began to fill the cabin, I pulled out my satellite phone and called Bill. He answered on the first ring. Tom? I'm at the cabin. Bill, there's something outside. Is the door locked? Yes. Shutters closed. Yes. Then you're okay. It won't come in. Just stay inside until full daylight. I'm arranging extraction. There'll be a helicopter at Otter Point Beach at 0800. Can you make it there from the cabin? It's less than a kilometer. Bill, what the fuck is? I don't know what it is, Tom. None of us do. But it's happened before. 1896, 2 wardens went missing on winter patrol. 1934, a forestry crew. 1972, a graduate student doing wolf research. All in that same stretch of coast, all in deep winter. He paused. The Ojibwe staff say it's something that gets hungry, really hungry. So hungry it forgets what it is and it starts trying to become something else. Something that can get close to food. That's not a real explanation, Bill. No, it's not. But it's the only one we have. The footsteps outside had stopped. I kept the phone to my ear, listening to Bill breathe on the other end, and waited for dawn. It didn't make another sound all night. But at 0300, I noticed something. The small window on the door hadn't shuttered it because it's only about 6 inches square, just enough to see out. I moved to it carefully and looked. There were tracks in the snow around the cabin, dozens of them. My boot prints all around the building in concentric circles, like something had been walking around and around for hours, practicing, learning the gait, getting it right. The helicopter pulled me out at 08:15. I never went back for my gear. Parks Canada filed it as incomplete survey due to equipment failure. I filed my resignation 30 days later. Bill retired 6 months after that. Neither of us talked about it officially, but he told me one thing before I left. The old protocol, the one about the dead hair in a line. There's a second part. If you see that pattern, it means something's already chosen you. It's learning everything about you, how you walk, how you sound, how you move. And once it knows enough, he shrugged. The people who went missing, we found some of them eventually, years later, living in towns, working jobs, with families who swore they'd been there the whole time. But they were different, hungry all the time, never quite warm. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know what I believe anymore. But I do know this. If you're in the backcountry in deep winter and you find animals killed but not eaten, arranged in patterns, don't try to rationalize it. Don't tell yourself it's natural behavior. Just turn around and walk out. And whatever you do, don't let it learn your voice. If this story kept you up at night, hit that subscribe button, because I've got dozens more Parks Canada incidents that never made the official reports, and trust me, they only get worse from here. I've marked property lines in 12 states over 15 years, and February of 2019 was the first time I had to explain to a sheriff why I abandoned $30,000 worth of equipment in the snow. My name is Jared Pritchard. I'm a licensed land surveyor, and most of my winter work happens in Minnesota, marking boundaries for timber sales, updating county plats, resolving property disputes in areas where the old survey markers have shifted or disappeared. It's solitary work, technical, and it requires focus. You're not just walking through the woods. You're measuring, calculating, documenting. Your mind is occupied with numbers and coordinates, not watching the tree line. Maybe that's why I didn't notice sooner. The job was a standard boundary survey for a private timber parcel adjacent to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. 3,200 acres of mixed hardwood and pine, most of it uncut since the 1940s. The property owner was preparing for a selective harvest and needed current documentation of the legal boundaries. The original survey was done in 1927, and the iron pins had to be verified or replaced. I started the survey on February 11th, working from a base camp I'd set up near the Eastern Access Road. Temperature was holding around 0 Fahrenheit, which is actually decent for February survey work, cold enough that the ground is solid, not so cold that your instruments freeze up. I had a crew of 2 local guys helping with the initial transect lines, but they were only contracted for 3 days. After that, I'd be finishing the interior corners solo. The first anomaly happened on day 4, February 15th. The crew had gone home, and I was working alone, pushing west along the northern boundary. I was using a combination of GPS and traditional chain survey techniques, cross-referencing the original plat notes that described the boundary as running west-northwest from the blazed oak to the granite outcrop, thence south to the creek confluence. I found the blazed oak, 92 years old, and you could still see the axe marks where the original surveyor had marked it. But when I shot my bearing toward where the granite outcrop should be, something was off. My GPS coordinates said I was in the right position, but the distances didn't match the original notes. That's not uncommon. Trees grow, landscapes shift. Surveyors in 1927 didn't have GPS, they made errors. You account for it, document the discrepancy, and move on. But while I was checking my notes, I noticed something else. Boot prints in the snow, running parallel to my route, maybe 20 meters to the north. Fresh prints. Deep tread, like winter hiking boots. They'd been made recently within the last hour, judging by how sharp the edges were. I was supposed to be alone out here. I called out. No response. The forest was quiet, that particular winter silence you get in pine woods when there's no wind. just the creaking of frozen trees and the occasional thump of snow falling from branches. And I figured maybe another surveyor or a winter hiker cutting through, though this wasn't marked trail and it was pretty deep backcountry for casual snowshoeing. I kept working, found the granite outcrop 40 minutes later, exactly where it should have been according to my corrected measurements. I hammered in a new witness stake, documented the coordinates, and started the southern transect toward the creek. That's when I found the second set of prints. Same boots, same stride length, but these tracks were ahead of me, running south along the exact line I was about to survey, like someone had walked my route before I'd planned it. Now, it's possible for two surveyors to be working the same parcel if there's been a clerical error, though it's rare. It's also possible someone was walking the property line for their own reasons, checking fences, scouting for hunting season, whatever. But these prints bothered me. They were too precise. They followed the survey line I'd calculated that morning before I had walked it. And they were alone, no other tracks coming in or going out, like the person had just appeared on that exact bearing and started walking. I should have radioed someone. I had a sat phone for emergencies. But what was I going to say? There are boot prints in the snow. I'm a professional. I was probably just being paranoid from too many nights alone in a tent, so I followed the tracks. The southern transect took me downslope through a stand of old white pine, the kind that survived the big logging operations because they were too remote or too difficult to access. Beautiful trees, some of them 3 feet in diameter. The forest floor was relatively clear, just snow and deadfall, and I made good time. The tracks stayed ahead of me, always just beyond where I was working, like whoever made them was staying exactly out of sight. At one point, I stopped and studied them more carefully. The gait was wrong. The stride length was consistent about 32 inches, which is normal for an adult male, but every fifth or sixth step, the stride would suddenly extend to 48 inches, then return to normal. Like the walker was occasionally taking these huge, loping steps for no reason. I checked my own tracks behind me. Normal spacing, consistent. The light was starting to fade. I'd pushed further than I'd planned, trying to reach the creek confluence before dark, and now I was looking at a 2-hour snowshoe back to camp in twilight. I marked my position on the GPS, took some reference photos, and turned around. The tracks I'd been following were gone. Not covered by new snow, we hadn't had precipitation all day. Just gone. The snow where they'd been was smooth, undisturbed, like nobody had walked there at all. But my own tracks were still visible heading south. I was standing in the middle of my trail, and the only prints in the snow were mine. I don't spook easily, but I move fast getting back to camp. By the time I reached my tent, it was full dark, and I was breathing hard, more from adrenaline than exertion. I got the camp stove going, made coffee, tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Snow can drift, wind can erase tracks. Maybe I'd been following an old trail and not noticed when it disappeared. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. I ate dinner, updated my field notes, and tried to sleep. At 2:37 a.m., I woke to the sound of someone walking around my tent. The footsteps were close, crunching through the crusty surface snow, steady, deliberate, circling. I lay perfectly still in my sleeping bag, listening. The steps made a complete circuit, paused, then made another circuit in the opposite direction, like someone pacing, learning the perimeter. I had a headlamp and a knife within reach. I didn't move. I didn't breathe any louder than I had to. The footsteps made 7 complete circles, then stopped directly outside the tent door. For maybe 30 seconds. Nothing. Then I heard breathing. Not panting or gasping, just slow, steady breathing, exactly matching my own rhythm. When I held my breath, it held its breath. When I exhaled, it exhaled. I waited until I heard it move away before I grabbed the headlamp and unzipped the tent. Nothing. Just my camp stove, equipment bags, snowshoes propped against a tree. I did a full 360 with the headlamp. The snow around the tent was smooth, untouched. No tracks, except my own from earlier. But I could smell something, faint but distinct, like meat that's been left out too long. The smell of rotten freezing weather. I packed up in the dark, didn't bother with coffee or breakfast, just stuffed everything into my pack, loaded the survey equipment onto the sled, and started hauling toward the access road. It was 5 miles, and I made it in under 2 hours, breaking trail by headlamp, not looking behind me. I got to my truck at dawn. The equipment was still on the sled, my pack was still loaded, but I didn't stop. I drove straight to the county sheriff's office in Ely and filed a report. Told them everything, the tracks, the breathing, the smell. The deputy who took my statement was polite but skeptical. He said they'd send someone to check the area, but it was probably a bear or a wolf, and I shouldn't have been camping alone in that cold anyway. They called me 3 days later. Deputy said they'd found my campsite, found my survey markers, found all of it. But they also found something else. Tracks, boot prints, human-sized, covering the entire survey area, hundreds of them, crisscrossing every transect line I'd planned to walk. The prints formed patterns, geometric shapes, spirals, grids, like someone had spent days methodically walking every possible route through that property. The prints were all the same boots, same tread, same size, and according to the snow depth and compaction, they'd all been made on the same night, February 15th. The night I left, the property owner declined to pursue the survey, said the timber sale wasn't worth the hassle. I kept the deposit and never asked for the rest of my fee. I also stopped taking solo winter contracts in Minnesota. Now I work in pairs, minimum, and I don't care how much it cuts into my profit margin. Because here's what the deputy told me off the record when I went back to pick up my statement. 3 other surveyors had worked that property over the past 40 years, 1979, 1994, 2008, all winter surveys, all solo operators. All of them reported the same things. I did tracks that appeared ahead of them, sounds outside their camps at night, that smell. The surveyor from 2008 never finished his contract either. But his wife said something changed after he came back. He'd always been a big eater. She said solid guy, 200 pounds. But after that job, he couldn't seem to get full. He'd eat dinner, then eat again an hour later. Then again. She found him one night in the kitchen at 3 a.m., eating raw hamburgers straight from the package. They divorced 6 months later. Last anyone heard, he was living in a cabin up near the Canadian border alone. Some hunters saw him the following winter, walking the tree line. They said he looked thin, starved thin, but his tracks in the snow were enormous. If you're ever surveying alone in winter and you start finding your own route walked ahead of you, don't finish the job. The boundary lines aren't worth it. Turn around, get to your vehicle, and don't look back. And if you hear something outside your tent at night matching your breathing, stay silent. Don't let it know you're awake. Because once it learns everything about you, your gait, your rhythm, your pattern, it doesn't need you anymore. It can walk those lines itself. Drop a comment below if you've ever had something follow you in the backcountry. I read every single one, and some of your stories have convinced me I'm not the only surveyor who's encountered this thing. Let's compare notes. My grandfather taught me everything about whitetail hunting, except what to do when you're the one being tracked. Name's Connor Webb. I've been hunting deer in Minnesota since I was 12 years old. That's 23 seasons, if you're counting. And know the Superior National Forest the way some people know their own neighborhoods. I can read sign, predict movement patterns, and I've taken deer in conditions that would send most hunters back to their trucks. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand I'm not someone who gets rattled easily in the woods. But November of 2022 changed that. I drew up permits for a management zone in the Superior National Forest, about 40 miles northwest of Ely. Good area, mixed habitat, decent deer density, far enough from the roads that you don't get weekend warriors bumbling through during peak hours. I'd scouted the area in September, found a natural funnel between two ridgelines where deer were moving between bedding and feeding areas, and set up a ground blind in a dense stand of spruce about 15 feet from the trail. Opening morning was November 5th. I hiked in 2 hours before dawn, got settled in the blind, and waited for first light. Temperature was around 22 degrees, no wind, fresh snow from 2 days prior. Perfect conditions. You get that kind of morning maybe 3 times a season if you're lucky. Legal shooting light came at 6:43 a.m. By 7:15, I'd seen 4 does and a spike buck, all moving along the expected route. I let them pass. I was waiting for something bigger, and the rut was just starting. Bucks would be moving all day, chasing does, making mistakes. At 7:52, the forest went silent. If you hunt, you know what I mean. There's a baseline of sound in the woods, birds, squirrels, branches creaking. When it all stops at once, something big is moving through. Usually a bear, sometimes a wolf pack. I went still, slowed my breathing, watched the trail. Nothing. The silence held for maybe 6 minutes. Then, from the north, I heard something walking. Slow, heavy steps, bipedal. The stride pattern was wrong for a deer, too measured, too deliberate. I assumed another hunter, probably pushing through toward the state land boundary. The steps got closer. I could hear them clearly now, crunching through the snow, snapping small branches, but I couldn't see anyone. The trail was visible for about 60 yards in both directions from my blind, and nothing was moving. The footsteps stopped directly in front of me, maybe 10 feet away. I could see the trail, see the snow, see the trees. Nothing was there, and I heard my name, Connor. My voice, my exact voice, the way it sounds on recordings, that subtle difference from how you hear yourself in your own head, speaking my name from empty air. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched. Connor, you out here? Again. Still my voice. The phrasing was something I'd say, exactly something I'd say if I was looking for my hunting partner, but I was alone. I hunt solo, always have. The voice moved, circled around the blind, staying just out of sight in the dense spruce, calling my name every 30 seconds or so, like someone trying to locate me. The footsteps were audible, but there was never anything visible. No shape, no movement, just sound. This went on for 11 minutes. I know because I was watching my watch, counting seconds, doing anything to keep from panicking. At 8:09, the voice stopped. The footsteps receded north. The normal forest sounds gradually returned. A raven called. A red squirrel chattered. Branches creaked in a breeze I couldn't feel. I stayed in the blind till 9:30. Didn't see another deer. Didn't hear anything unusual. But every animal that moved through the area was nervous, ears up, heads swiveling, that skittish behavior you see when predators are near. At 9:45, I decided to check the trail where the footsteps had been. The snow told a clear story. A set of tracks, boot prints, human-sized, deep tread approached my blind from the north, circled it completely, then headed back north. The tracks were impossibly fresh, the edges sharp, and the stride length was wrong. 30 inches for 3 steps, then 60 inches for 1 step, then back to 30. Like whatever made them was walking normally, then occasionally taking these massive, loping strides. I followed them. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe, or the part of my brain that hunts wanted to identify what I was dealing with. The tracks led north for about 300 yards, staying on the deer trail, then cut west into denser timber. That's where I found the deer. A doe, maybe 130 pounds, freshly killed, still warm when I checked, but the kill was wrong. Deer taken by wolves show bite, trauma, carrying the chaotic damage of a pack kill. Deer hit by cars have blunt force injuries. This doe had been opened from sternum to pelvis with what looked like surgical precision. One long cut. The internal organs were gone. Not eaten on sight, just removed. Taken. The snow around the carcass showed the same boot prints. They approached from the east, circled the deer, then continued west. There was no blood trail leading away. Whatever had done this had carried the organs without dripping. I should have left. Should have hiked straight back to my truck, driven home, and never thought about this place again. But I'm a hunter. When you're tracking something, you follow until you get answers or lose the trail. I followed west. The tracks led me into a section of forest. I hadn't scouted a low area between ridges that probably flooded in spring. The trees were older here, bigger, with that cathedral feeling you get in old growth stands. Very little undergrowth, just moss and snow and silence. After maybe half a mile, the tracks stopped, not at an obstacle or a change in terrain. They just ended, mid-stride, like whatever made them had stepped from the snow into air. I stood there, looking at the last print, trying to understand, and that's when I smelled it. Wet dog, rotting meat, and something else. Something chemical, like ammonia or cleaning solution. The smell was coming from directly above me. I looked up. There was a face looking down from the branches. 20 feet up, pale, wrong. It had human features, eyes, nose, mouth, but the proportions were stretched, elongated. The eyes were too far apart. The mouth was too wide, and it was smiling. Not a friendly smile, not even a threatening smile. It was the smile of something that was trying to remember how smiling worked. I ran, didn't think, didn't plan, just turned and ran east, back toward the trail, toward my blind, toward anything familiar. Behind me, I heard it drop from the tree, heard it land in the snow with a wet, heavy sound, heard it start to follow. The thing didn't run. It walked. But the stride length, Jesus, the stride length. I could hear it taking those massive, loping steps, covering ground faster than I could sprint. I had maybe a 40-yard head start, and it was closing. I cleared the low area, hit the slope up to the ridge, my lungs burning in the cold air. My rifle was slapping against my back. My pack was catching on branches. I didn't care. I just ran. At the ridgeline, I passed another hunter, a guy in blaze orange, standing next to a tree, perfectly still. I shouted at him, "Run, there's something behind me." But he didn't move, didn't even turn his head. I kept going. I made it back to the trail at 10:38. The blind was ahead. I didn't stop, kept running. The sound of footsteps behind me had stopped, but I didn't trust it. I ran the 2 miles back to the access road, got to my truck, threw my gear in the bed, and locked the doors. I sat there for 20 minutes, shaking, watching the tree line. Nothing emerged, no movement, just normal forest. I drove to the ranger station and reported what I'd found, the gutted doe, the tracks, the whole thing. Left out the part about the face in the tree. The ranger took notes, said they'd send someone to investigate, asked if I was feeling okay. I said I was fine and drove home. 3 days later, the ranger called. They'd found the doe, found the tracks, but they'd also found something else. 6 more deer, all gutted the same way, arranged in a wide circle around the area where the tracks ended. The organs were piled in the center of the circle, fresh, steaming in the cold, and they'd found the hunter. I'd passed on the ridge. He'd been reported missing the same day I was there. Name was Kyle Hendricks. He'd been hunting solo, same zone as me. They found him standing next to that tree, exactly where I'd seen him, still in blaze orange, still standing. He was alive, but unresponsive. Wouldn't speak, wouldn't move voluntarily, wouldn't eat. He just stood there, swaying slightly, until they physically carried him out. At the hospital, doctors said he was in some kind of catatonic state, physically healthy, but mentally gone. Like someone had scooped out everything that made him a person and left just the body. His truck was parked at the access road, same as mine. His rifle was still in the blind. His pack was in his truck. But according to his wife, he'd left for the hunt wearing different boots than the ones he was found in. The boots he was wearing when they found him matched the tracks in the snow. Same tread, same size. The ranger asked if I'd seen anything unusual. I told him no. I'm not proud of that lie, but I didn't think the truth would help Kyle Hendricks, and I didn't want to end up in a hospital bed myself, being studied by doctors who wouldn't believe me anyway. I haven't been back to that zone. Haven't hunted in Superior National Forest since. I still hunt, just not there. And I don't hunt alone anymore. I bring my brother-in-law, and we stay within sight of each other at all times. Kyle Hendricks was released from the hospital after 6 weeks. According to his wife, he's different now. Doesn't talk much, sleeps most of the day, but he started going for walks at night, long walks. She hears him leave around midnight and come back near dawn. She followed him once, said he walks in perfect geometric patterns, circles, spirals, grids, like he's practicing learning routes, and he's always hungry. She says he eats constantly but never gains weight, just gets thinner and thinner, but keeps eating. I don't know what I saw in those woods. I don't know what took Kyle Hendricks and left that shell behind, but I know this. If you're hunting alone and the forest goes silent, trust your instincts. If you hear your own voice calling from the trees, don't answer. And if you see another hunter standing perfectly still, not moving, not responding, keep walking. Don't stop to help, because it might not be a hunter anymore. If you've got your own stories about things that hunt back, make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell icon. I post every week, and your experiences help other people understand they're not losing their minds out there. We're all just trying to make it back to the truck. The Department of Natural Resources never published the final report on the Hiawatha site closure. I know because I'm the reason they sealed it. I'm Preston Walsh, and for 8 years I worked as a forestry technician for the Michigan DNR, mostly in the Upper Peninsula. My job was to conduct post-harvest inspections on timber sales, making sure contractors followed their cutting plans, checking for environmental compliance, documenting regeneration potential. It's bureaucratic work, technical, the kind of thing that doesn't make for interesting dinner conversation, but it's important. Forests are managed resources, and someone has to verify the management is being done right. January of 2023, I was assigned to inspect a harvest site in Hiawatha National Forest, about 16 miles north of Manistique. The sale had been a selective cut, take the mature aspen and jack pine, leave the young growth, maintain canopy diversity. The contractor had finished in mid-December and cleared out. My job was to snowshoe through, verify stump counts against the harvest plan, check for soil disruption, and file the completion paperwork. Standard stuff. I'd done maybe 40 of these inspections. Never had a problem. I drove out on January 12th. The access road was plowed to within half a mile of the site, and I snowshoed the rest. Weather was typical for January in the UP, 15 degrees, overcast, 3 feet of base snow with another 4 inches of fresh powder from the night before. Good conditions for seeing what had been disturbed recently. The harvest site was about 60 acres, irregular shape, bordered by state land to the north and a frozen creek to the south. The contractor had done clean work, stumps cut low, slash piled for burning, skid trails minimized. I started my inspection at the southwest corner, working a grid pattern, counting stumps, checking species, taking photos for the report. 40 minutes in, I noticed the silence. Logging sites are usually active with wildlife. The slash piles attract rabbits and grouse. The The disturbed ground brings in deer looking for browse. You get ravens and jays checking for anything edible. But this site was dead quiet. No birds, no tracks except my own. Just wind moving through the remaining trees and the creak of cold wood. I kept working. By 11 a.m., I'd covered about a third of the site and hadn't found any violations. Good stump heights, proper spacing, no damage to retention trees. I stopped for lunch, thermos of coffee, sandwich, some trail mix, and that's when I saw the gloves. A pair of work gloves, leather with fluorescent orange trim, sitting in the middle of a small clearing about 20 yards from where I was eating. They were arranged carefully, palms down, fingers spread, like someone had placed them there deliberately. Fresh snow around them, no tracks leading in or out. I walked over. The gloves were contractor gear. I recognized the brand, same stuff the cutting crews wear. Could have been left behind during harvest, but they were sitting on top of 4 inches of fresh snow that fell last night. Someone had placed them here recently. I looked around. No footprints. No sign of anyone else in the area. I called out, figuring maybe another DNR tech was doing a follow-up inspection. No response. The gloves were frozen stiff. I picked them up, and that's when I noticed the circle. The gloves had been at the center of a perfect circle, maybe 8 feet in diameter, formed by small branches stuck upright in the snow. I hadn't seen it from 20 yards away because the branches were thin, just twigs, really barely visible unless you were looking for them. Someone had built this recently after last night's snowfall, and they'd done it without leaving tracks. I took photos, documented the location in my GPS, and moved on. Probably just some hiker with too much time, or teenagers doing something weird. The UP gets its share of both. By 1 p.m., I'd found 3 more circles, all the same size, all made with small branches, all with something at the center, a pocket knife, a water bottle, a carabiner, all contractor gear, all sitting on fresh snow with no tracks nearby. I radioed the district office, got Emily Tran, the zone manager, described what I was seeing. There was a pause before she responded. Preston, what's your current location? I gave her the coordinates. How far are you from the access road? About 2 miles. Why? I need you to head back. Now. Don't finish the inspection. What's going on? There was an incident at that site during the harvest. The contractor didn't report it because, look, just head back, okay? I'll explain when you get to the office. I'm not great at following orders when they don't make sense, so I asked the obvious question, what kind of incident? Another pause. Longer this time. One of the crew went missing. December 8th. They searched for 3 days, didn't find him. Assumed he wandered off, got disoriented, exposure. But some of the other workers said things before they left. Strange things. About sounds in the cutting area. About finding their equipment move when they came back from breaks. About feeling watched. Why wasn't this in the briefing file? Because the contractor threatened to sue if we implied the forest was unsafe. Said it would tank their reputation. We agreed to keep it quiet if they finished the job and left without making noise. But Preston, the missing guy's name was Aaron Voss, and we found his truck at the access road 2 days ago. He's been gone 6 weeks. His truck has been sitting there the whole time, and now it's running. Engine on, heater going, like someone just parked it. That doesn't make any sense. I know. That's why I need you to leave. We're sending a sheriff's deputy to secure the area. You shouldn't be there alone. I told her I'd start heading back, signed off, and looked around the harvest site. The light was already starting to fade. You get maybe 7 hours of usable daylight in the UP in January, and I'd burned most of it. The temperature was dropping, and I was 2 miles from my truck through dense woods and fresh snow. I started moving. The route back followed the main skid trail the contractors had used to haul logs out. Wide, relatively flat, easy to navigate. I was making good time, and I just started to relax when I heard the chainsaw. Not close, maybe quarter-mile to the east, deeper in the harvest area. The distinctive high-pitched scream of a two-stroke engine running at full throttle. Then it cut off. Silence. And it started again. Stopped. Started. Someone was cutting wood, or pretending to. I stopped walking and listened. The pattern was wrong. When you're cutting timber, you make continuous cuts. Fell the tree. Limb it. Bucket into sections. You don't start and stop every 15 seconds. This sounded like someone testing the saw, revving it, playing with it. The sound was getting closer. I picked up my pace. The skid trail ran roughly southeast, back to the access road, and the chainsaw sounds were coming from the northeast. As long as I kept moving, I'd be angling away from it. But the sounds were moving too, paralleling my route, keeping pace. At 1620, about half a mile from the access road, I found the arrangement. Someone had dragged branches, small logs, debris from the cutting operation into the middle of the trail and piled it into a wall. Not random, deliberate. The pile was 6 feet high and stretched across the entire width of the trail, blocking my route. I could go around it, but that meant leaving the trail and breaking through deeper snow. Or I could climb over it, or I could backtrack and find a different route out. While I was deciding, the chainsaw started up again, closer this time, maybe 100 yards to the east. I could see light through the trees, a headlamp or work light, bobbing slightly like someone walking with it. I went around the pile, took the south route, pushing through thigh-deep snow, using the frozen creek as a reference line. My snowshoes kept catching on buried deadfall, and branches slapped at my face, but I kept moving. The chainsaw kept following, always just out of sight, always at the same distance. At 1647, I broke out onto the access road. I could see my truck maybe 200 yards ahead, and parked right behind it, engine running, headlights on, was another truck. Newer model, F-250, contractor plates, Aaron Voss's truck. I approached carefully. The driver's door was open, engine idling, heat blasting, radio playing something country and low. The cab was empty, but there was a lunch cooler on the passenger seat, a thermos in the cup holder, and a clipboard with paperwork on the dash. Fresh paperwork, dated today, January 12th, 2023. The paperwork was a cutting plan for this site with today's date, signed Aaron Voss. I looked back toward the forest. The chainsaw had stopped. Everything was quiet. The sun was setting, turning the snow pink and orange. Beautiful, peaceful, wrong. I got in my truck, locked the doors, and called Emily. Told her everything. She said the deputy was 15 minutes out and I should wait. I said I wasn't waiting and started driving. In my rearview mirror, I saw someone walk out of the forest and approach Voss's truck. Tall, thin, wearing a contractor's vest and hard hat. The figure moved wrong, joints bending at odd angles, stride too long. It got into the truck, closed the door, and sat there. Just sat there, illuminated by the dome light, staring straight ahead. I drove faster. The deputy found Aaron Voss's truck the next day. Empty, engine still running. The paperwork was gone, but they found the lunch cooler. Inside was food, fresh food, sandwiches, an apple, a bag of chips. The apple had a bite taken out of it. The bite mark was too wide, too many teeth. They never found Aaron Voss. The search was called off after a week. The harvest site was closed indefinitely, and the final inspection was marked as incomplete. My report was sealed, and I was reassigned to a different district. But Emily told me something before I left. She said they'd gone back through the records and found 3 other sites in Hiawatha that had been closed without explanation over the past 20 years, all in winter. All after contractors reported missing crew members, all in the northern sections of the forest. And at each site, years later, other forestry workers reported the same things: chainsaw sounds with no source, equipment arranged in patterns, trucks found running with no drivers. She said the old timers had a name for it. They called it the hungry season. Said something in those woods gets so starved during winter that it starts trying to become human, starts imitating, learning, wearing the shapes it finds. I don't work for the DNR anymore. I took a job with a private consulting firm downstate, doing environmental assessments for development projects, office work mostly. No winter field work, no solo inspections. Because I keep thinking about that bite mark in the apple, about how many teeth it took to make a mark that wide. And I keep thinking about Aaron Voss, who's been missing for 6 weeks, but whose truck showed up running with fresh paperwork dated today. If something can learn to sign a name, what else can it learn? Can it learn to drive? Can it learn to go home? Can it learn to be someone's husband, someone's father, someone's friend? And how long before the people around it notice it's always hungry, always cold, always just a little bit wrong? If you're working in the woods this winter, trust your instincts. If you find your gear moved, if you hear equipment running with no operator, if you see someone who moves wrong, get out, file your incomplete report, and leave. The paperwork isn't worth your life. And if someone, comes back from a winter job acting different, eating more, sleeping less, moving strange, watch them carefully, because it might not be them anymore. There's a difference between being alone in the wilderness and being the only human thing for 30 miles. I learned that difference on the ice. My name is Ethan Rousseau, and I guide winter canoe expeditions in Quetico Provincial Park, Ontario. Most people think of Quetico as a summer paddling destination, pristine lakes, Canadian Shield granite, basically the northern version of the Boundary Waters. But there's a small subset of people who want to experience it in winter when the lakes freeze solid and you can traverse routes that would take weeks by water. It's specialized work, dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. We pull canoes on sleds across the ice, set up cold camps, navigate by map and compass because GPS batteries die in the cold. Most trips are 8 to 12 days. You're completely self-sufficient. No resupply, no bailout options. If something goes wrong, you're a long way from help. January of 2024, I took a client on a 10-day traverse from the Lac La Croix entry point to the Nim Lake exit. The client was a photographer named Graham Peterson, mid-40s, experienced winter camper, wanted to shoot the northern lights over the Shield Lakes. Good guy, competent, the kind of client who makes the job easy. We left on January 8th. Weather forecast was stable, temperatures around minus 15 Celsius, clear skies predicted for the first 5 days. We were pulling 2 sleds loaded with food, fuel, camping gear, and Graham's camera equipment. The route would take us through a chain of lakes: Lac La Croix, Kashapiwi, Cache, Quetico, then northwest to Nim. The first 3 days were perfect. Cold, clear, hard work, but rewarding. We made good distance, and Graham got some incredible shots. We saw wolf tracks, a moose browsing in a frozen marsh, the northern lights every night. Textbook trip. On day 4, January 11th, we reached Cache Lake. It's a medium-sized lake, maybe 4 miles long, with a complicated shoreline, lots of bays and islands. The Ojibwe name translates roughly to spirit water, though the official park literature says it's named after the historical fur trade cache sites where voyageurs stored supplies. I've crossed Cache Lake maybe 20 times, never had a problem, but on this trip, something felt different from the moment we stepped onto the ice. Graham noticed it too. He stopped, looked around, and said, "It's really quiet here." He was right. The normal sounds you expect, wind in the pines, ice cracking and settling, ravens calling, were absent. Just this heavy, oppressive silence, like the lake was holding its breath. We planned to camp on the west shore, but I'd been told by an Ojibwe guide I worked with, guy named Raymond Keewatin, never to camp on the west shore of Cache Lake in January. He'd said it casually, like he was giving me directions, but there was weight behind it. I didn't press him for details. Some knowledge you respect without needing explanation, so I steered us toward the east shore instead. We were making good time across the lake when Graham stopped pulling his sled and pointed north. "Is that smoke?" I looked. About half a mile ahead, on a small point jutting into the lake, I could see what looked like a campfire. Thin column of smoke rising straight up in the still air. But we were the only permitted party in this section of the park. Winter permits are limited, and I'd checked before we left. Nobody else should be here. We altered course and headed toward it. As we got closer, I could see the camp more clearly. A canvas tent, old style, the kind voyageurs used. Not modern nylon. A fire smoldering outside. Snowshoes propped against a tree, but no movement. No person. We called out when we were about 50 yards away. No response. Graham wanted to check if someone needed help. I didn't, but I couldn't articulate why. We approached on foot, leaving the sleds on the ice. The camp was old. Not abandoned. Last week old. Decades old. The tent canvas was rotted, held up more by ice than structure. The snowshoes were museum pieces, wood frame, rawhide webbing, completely deteriorated, but the fire was burning. Fresh wood, good heat. Someone had fed it recently. Inside the tent we found supplies. Canvas bags with flour, salt, pork, tea, the kind of provisions you'd find in a historical reenactment. But the food was fresh. The pork wasn't frozen. The flour was dry and loose, and there was a journal, leather-bound, pages, crisp and clean. Graham picked it up, started reading. His expression changed. "Ethan, this is written in French, old French, like really old. What's it say?" He flipped through pages, translating haltingly. "It's a voyageur journal, dated 1876. A guy named Levesque. He's writing about crossing Cache Lake in winter. Says the ice is good, the weather is holding, they're making decent time. Then the entries get weird. He starts writing about hearing songs, French songs, the kind the voyageurs used to sing while paddling. But he's alone. His partner went ahead to scout the route, and he's been waiting 3 days for him to come back. Keep reading." Graham turned more pages. His face went pale. The last entry says, "I can see Marcel on the ice. He is walking toward camp, but Marcel has been dead for 2 days. I found his body in the shallows near the west shore, frozen in the ice, his stomach empty. The thing that looks like Marcel is getting closer. It is singing my song in my voice." That's when we heard it. From the ice, maybe 200 yards out, a man's voice, singing in French. An old paddling song, the rhythm of it unmistakable even if you don't speak the language. The melody carried across the frozen lake, clear and strong, but there was nobody visible on the ice. Graham started backing away from the tent. I grabbed the journal and followed. We got back to the sleds and started moving fast, heading east, away from the camp and the singing. The voice followed. It didn't get louder or softer, just maintained the same distance, always behind us, always singing. After about 20 minutes, it stopped mid-phrase, just cut off. The silence that followed was worse. We kept moving. The east shore was maybe a mile ahead. We'd set up camp, figure out what the hell we'd just experienced, and decide whether to continue or abort the trip. Graham was shaken but holding it together. We were both moving fast, adrenaline overriding the cold and exertion. That's when I saw the tracks. They were crossing the ice ahead of us, coming from the south and heading north. Snowshoe tracks, old-style prints like the ones we'd seen at the camp, but these were fresh made in the last hour, judging by the definition. And they were paralleling our route, staying just ahead of us, like whoever made them was pacing us. I stopped, looked at Graham. Did you leave the sled at any point? No. Why? I pointed at the tracks. Those are snowshoe prints. We're pulling sleds. We haven't used snowshoes since we crossed the portage yesterday. Graham stared at the tracks, then at me. Ethan, what the fuck is going on? Before I could answer, we heard the voice again, but this time it wasn't singing in French. It was speaking English, and it sounded exactly like Graham. Ethan, wait up. I need to adjust my sled. We both turned. Graham was standing next to me. I could see him. I could hear him breathing, but the voice was coming from behind us, out on the lake, speaking with Graham's exact intonation and phrasing. Ethan, seriously, hold on. Something's wrong with the harness. Graham grabbed my arm. His hand was shaking. That's not me. I'm not saying that. The voice continued. Ethan, I need help. Come back, please. I made a decision. We're running. East Shore. Don't stop. Don't look back. Move. We ran. Well, we didn't run. You can't run pulling a loaded sled across ice. But we moved as fast as the equipment and conditions allowed. Behind us, the voice kept calling. Sometimes it was Graham's voice. Sometimes it was mine. At one point, it started singing again, but this time in English, using words Graham had said earlier in the trip. Just random fragments of conversation strung together into something that sounded almost like a song. The ice under our feet started making sounds. Not cracking, that's sharp, sudden. These were low groans, like something massive was moving underneath. The frozen surface was flexing, settling, responding to weight that shouldn't be there. We hit the east shore at around 15:30, found a clearing 50 meters inland, behind a natural windbreak of spruce, set up camp, fast, tent, stove, gear, inside. By the time we had the stove going and water melting, it was getting dark. Neither of us talked much. We ate, checked our supplies, confirmed our position on the map. The original plan had us camping on Cache for one night, then continuing northwest to Quetico Lake. But I wasn't spending another second on this lake. I told Graham we were leaving at first light, crossing the remaining 2 miles of ice, hitting the portage, and getting off Cache as fast as possible. He didn't argue. We took shifts staying awake. I took first watch. Graham took second. Around midnight, during Graham's watch, I woke to him shaking my shoulder. Ethan, look. I sat up. Through the tent mesh, I could see the lake. The moon was nearly full, and the ice gleamed like metal. And there, maybe 30 yards from shore, was a figure. It was standing perfectly still, facing our camp. Tall, too tall, wearing what looked like old voyageur clothing, wool capote, sash, fur hat. But the proportions were wrong. The arms were too long. The torso was too thin. And even from 30 yards, even in moonlight, I could see it was smiling. We watched it for 3 hours. It never moved, never looked away, just stood there on the ice, smiling. At 04:30, Graham whispered, "Is that thing waiting for us?" "I don't know. What do we do?" I thought about Raymond's warning. West Shore. Don't camp on the West Shore. But he never said anything about the lake itself. Never said anything about things that stand on the ice and smile. We wait for daylight. Then we move. Fast. Dawn came at 07:15. The figure was gone. No tracks where it had been standing. We packed in silence, loaded the sleds, and started across the remaining ice. The crossing took 90 minutes. We didn't talk. Didn't stop. Every few minutes, I'd hear something, footsteps on ice, voices calling, the scrape of a sled runner. But when I'd look, there was nothing. Just us and 2 miles of frozen lake. We hit the portage at 0900, pulled the sleds onto land, and kept moving. Didn't rest until we were across Quetico Lake and setting up camp on the far shore. That night, Graham looked through his photos. He'd been taking shots throughout the trip, documenting everything. When he got to the images from Cache Lake, he went quiet. "Ethan, look at this." He showed me his camera screen. It was a photo of our camp on the east shore, taken from inside the tent during his watch. Through the tent mesh, you could see the lake, and you could see the figure standing on the ice. But in the photo, there were two figures. The one we'd been watching, and another one standing right at the edge of our camp, just outside the tent. We hadn't seen the second one. It had been there the entire time, maybe 3 feet away, separated only by the tent fabric. Graham flipped to the next photo. Same composition, but now there were 3 figures, then 4, then 5. Each photo showed more, all standing in a semicircle around our tent, all smiling. We never saw them. We watched that lake for 3 hours, and we never saw anything except the one figure 30 yards out. We finished the trip, got to Nim Lake, exited at the ranger station, filed our report. Didn't mention any of this, just said the weather was good, the route was solid, no issues. Graham went home and developed his photos, sent them to me 2 weeks later with a note. I showed these to a colleague who specializes in historical photography. He says the clothing the figures are wearing matches French-Canadian voyageur gear from the 1870s. He also says the film shows evidence of double exposure, like someone exposed the negatives twice, but these are digital photos. There's no mechanism for double exposure. I talked to Raymond, told him everything. He listened without interrupting, then nodded. The West Shore is where they starved. 1876. A fur brigade got caught in early freeze-up. 6 men. They tried to wait it out. The supplies ran low. By January, they were eating rawhide from their snowshoes. By February, they were eating each other. Only one survived. He made it to a trading post in March, weighed 90 pounds, couldn't speak. He died a week later. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because knowing doesn't help. The lake remembers them. The hunger remembers them. It's not the men themselves, they're long gone. It's the shape of what they became. And it tries to fill that shape with whatever it finds. What does that mean? It means the thing on the ice wasn't Marcel Levesque or any of those voyageurs. It was just hunger wearing their form. And if you'd stayed on that West Shore, if you'd listened to it singing, if you'd let it get close enough to really learn you. He shrugged. There'd be 2 more figures on that ice, you and your client, standing there, smiling, waiting for the next people to camp on Cache Lake in January. I don't guide winter trips in Quetico anymore. I told the Park Service I was scaling back, taking only summer contracts. They understood. Turnover is high for winter guides. Most people only last a few seasons before something changes their mind. If you're planning a winter expedition in the Boundary Waters region, respect the local knowledge. If someone tells you not to camp in a certain area, don't ask why, just follow the advice. And if you're crossing a frozen lake in deep winter and you see someone standing on the ice, alone, miles from anywhere, don't approach them. Don't call out to them. Don't try to help, because they're not waiting for rescue. They're waiting for you. Thanks for watching this one all the way through. Seriously, it means a lot that you stuck with it. If you enjoyed this story and you want to help the channel grow, the absolute best thing you can do is share it with a friend who loves horror. Send them the link. Tell them to watch. We're trying to build something here, and word of mouth is everything.